They monitor the brain activities and also the motion with their eyeballs, right? Like, where they're looking at. The Westerners would focus on the elephant for a very long period of time, that center object. But the Easterner would be like, elephant surroundings, elephant surroundings. The tiger in the circus is different than the tiger in the wild, right? So this is where the Westerner interpreted the meaning of the separate object, why the Easterner picture as a whole, the relation and the reaction. Remember my question that I talked about, why your Asian friends from China, right? From China would take this big picture as a surrounding of a person, not necessary to be that small, but to them, being correlated with their background and objects is about that relationship. I have been there. Look at, I was standing there, and that is where they are, right? Like the cathedrals are. But for Westerners, more so, it's like, hey, this is me. That's why they had to take a lot of close-up pictures, right? And this is me. I'm here, and that is that, right? Like it's separate things. As we're going to get pretty close to our end of our speech, I want to show you a couple more pictures. The left side is the Western painting. The right side is actually the ancient Chinese painting. What are the differences? Can you see? So this is a horizontal, right? Like I'm sitting there looking at that. This reminds me like Monet, right? Just always taking picture, paint at the exact location with exact perspective angle for the cathedrals or the train station, right? They are the separate object to that, to that meaning. But for Westerners, the dimension view is from one viewpoint, right? This is where the architecture things, in theory started to begin, right? You always see this horizontal and it's going to vanish in one dot. But Easterners conceptually felt it is a part of the group, almost like you are taking a picture from the bird's eye view, right? Like you are, in an airplane or something. And to some extent, you are kind of like, hey, there's a lot of things going on. You're in part of that, part of that experience, part of that group. As for the last one to come, which one you think the Easterner will tend to think of? I see we all say, the front person is happy. So the Easterners tend to think the person in the front maybe is a little bit awkward. You know what? They just had a discussion. They want to close the deal, but not agree with the proposal. But you know what? They have to have a diplomat, like come out and say, oh, we love to take your offer, but, right? You have a lot of implication in that, background that maybe he is just awkwardly smile that he have to, like it's like, this is a decision, it's not my decision, but, that kind of sense. But an interesting perspective about Easterner is we tend to believe that the personality trait, personality trait is not the property of a person. The Westerner may say, people is kind, and kind people do kind things. But the Easterner would believe, a person can be kind and mean at the same time based on surroundings. Right? This is the old saying, what goes around comes around. And with that being said, I have 7 more minutes for some questions. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Any questions?
I read recently a claim that this collective versus individual partially can be explained that China grows rice while Europe grows wheat. And they said that within China, across the river, there were 2 places. One, they were growing rice, the other, on the other bank of the river, they were growing wheat, and they tested differently about individualism, collectivism, tendencies. Have you heard thoughts?
So are you trying to imply even they're growing the same breed of rice, the people who from a different region tasted it
The-
differently?
The claim was that the rice needs to be collective work. You cannot grow rice by yourself. While the wheat, you can grow wheat by yourself and harvest it by yourself without the help of your neighbors.
Oh, interesting. This is actually not a question, but more as a very good, valuable information for me. I didn't know that. I don't know that's a policy, but I know that's like the pollens, right? Like it's just how an organic food cannot be propagated next to the one that's not. Maybe there's some matters to that, right? But Chinese are a big consumer for rice. And one of the reasons is, also in the southern portion of the China, like rice can be harvested much more quicker, like maybe 2 to 3 seasons, right? Rather than like maybe for wheat or the rice in northern areas, you probably only have 1 season rice per year, right? Sorry, I can get to your question after, we can talk about it, in more detail. I love to learn. What else? Have you had any of you planning to go to China? Have you ever had a, girlfriend who is, from China? What is your experience? Share me with one.
Actually, I just had a question about, in your opinion, why do you think that there are many Chinese who enter into the U.S. with, science, technology, math, engineering kind of field?
Oh man, Eric, you were right on. Actually, this is a topic that I kind of want to talk a little bit more on the education side. So Eric's question is, why there are so many Chinese or maybe Asians, right, like, Indians who come to the United States for higher education, right, in that sense. I want to go back to our talk on, the big city, right? When I apply, to the grad school, you have to go to the TOEFL and the GMAT GRE exam, right? And in those articles and essays, I always talk about, do you like countryside more, or you like city more? In my mind, there's no question for that, because like in the rural area for China, which is not urbanized, you get no university, no education, entertainment, any other resources, very, very scarce, right? But in the big city, you get like in China, in Beijing, we have more than 100 universities or colleges, right? Why it is kind of important, going back to your question, is this career, this acceleration ladder in terms of how you're going to excel, how you're going to join the big city, how you're going to be part of this bigger resources group in big city. Education is only one way. One and only way, actually. In Tsinghua University, equivalent to MIT in Beijing, these are the universities, our government officials, like chairmen, are selected from those groups, right? This is very different compared to the structure, social structure in the US, and indeed many of the Western countries. So that's why, to us, like, if you study well, you know what, we're going to strive for a little bit more into the education. And I was looking at, I don't know if you guys heard about the Gallup profile. Basically, that is a third party actually rates by answering like 30 minutes question and tell which top strengths you are. Like a lot of us probably use that for our kids when they actually develop into their career, like what kind of personality traits they have. What I've noticed in Caterpillar, right, like in my company, most of the people I have met that are from China, the top 5 strengths, one of them is a learner. Because I felt this learning just become a survival skill. Like for me, if I don't learn something by the end of the day, I'm just restless. I felt like I have wasted this day, right? And I think maybe in a compulsive manner, that wasn't really healthy. But in retrospect, this is how people sense the education, the knowledge, the skill, and new things are how you survive in this environment. And that's how drive a lot of people say, you know what, I'm good at study the book, right? But you know what, I'm going to be more adventurous, I'm going to learn more, I'm going to try to explore and excel. That's a long,
When you were talking about big cities and rural, do you not have, like, we have small towns?
We have a lot of small towns, like we call like a small county and a small town, small city, right? Like, host maybe more than 200 people. We would see that in Illinois, right? But in China, it's very similar. Rather than have a state, we have a province and cities, and small, area or district we call. But the difference is, like, in those small cities, like, they have a lot of a social phenomenon that because the parents had their baby and they have to strive for a better life, so they go to China. In a bigger city like Shanghai, Beijing, to strive for a better life with a lot more resources. The kids are, like, left alone. They're in a very young age with their grandparents, right? But my point is, to imply back to your question is, I think that differences are still much more there. I was saying a lot of people felt more comfortable to raise our kids in Peoria, right? Good resources, good school district, a lot of activities. Go to the park district that have so much things that you're just overwhelmed with, right? But in China, in the city of this size, you're probably not going to see much of those resources and the level of expertise here, right? So living in the suburb is a lifestyle, or living in the suburb or city, or living in a rural area, that wouldn't call Peoria a rural area, but living in the smaller city like ours, we felt like very sufficient, and it's a lifestyle we choose. But in China, it's different, right? It's not a good school, not a lot of activities. You're not going to see the exhibition. You're not going to see a lot of bookstores, right? Everything's more scarce in there. Please.
So when someone finishes college and they know X number of characters, how do they learn all the other ones?
So basically, we said that there are 56,000 of Chinese characters, right? If you learn all of that, you become like, Chinese, language major. So the most populous one is between 3,000 to 6,000. That's sustain you to actually read the newspaper, right? So you don't need it to actually continue to learn unless you want to read something that's really like old Chinese, right? So it wasn't really necessary because from the newspaper and the book, you have 3,000 to 6,000 Chinese characters are totally sufficient.
Well, just along the same lines, are they still making new ones? Out of the 56,000, do they add more every year?
I would say maybe not making up more words, like more cues,
Yeah.
but they combine them to make some little more fashionable words, just like the buzzword that we're coming up with, like, on the internet, LOL, right? That you can search on, Webster, and you will see those, right? But it wasn't really making up a cube of a Chinese character, so I wouldn't say that may not be true, but people trying to interpretate a lot of the ancient hieroglyphics still, right? They're trying to explore what are the meanings of that. Why do people next to, there's still new Chinese characters that people still didn't comprehend and try to bring that into a live dictionary. Okay, Eric?
Well, thank you so much for coming, Gina. We really appreciate your talk. It's a little
Thank you.